Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chats. I'm Krista Harmon. I am one of the workforce development consultants here at the Kent Intermediate School District, and I'm so happy to have Holly Simon with us today. She's a campaign manager, and I'm looking forward to learning. So welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we have folks who love to learn about careers so that they can, make some good decisions for themselves or even share it with other people. So take us back when you were a teenager, where a lot of our viewers are, and did you think you'd grow up to be a campaign manager? What were your thoughts back then?
When I was a teenager, I was always very, I would consider myself a little bit of a jack of all trades. I always kind of wanted to do a little bit of everything. I think if I had my way, I would have been a writer and maybe like a carpenter and an actress and, just kind of about anything you can think of. So I didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to do for a career. I actually was like, I'll go to college and get a degree in something. And my something I landed on was English because I liked reading books. And that was, kind of the extent of my thought process there. I, had heard you can't get a job as an English major. And I had heard, just things about like that there's not really a field for that. And I was like, well, I'm not even thinking that far ahead. I'll just focus on reading some books and see where that takes me. And so I was really interested in politics and government, but I had not really thought about it for a career until a lot later. Actually, when I was in adulthood and had already kind of been through college, was more so the time that I was like, hey, I think I want to go into public service through the avenue of, politics and government.
And I really appreciate you, sharing that you just loved reading and, you liked writing. And so you kind of just followed your natural skill sets and interests at that time and kind of was just trusting that the rest of it would come together. And I think that's such a good strategy in some ways. Sometimes I think young people want to have it all decided right away. And at 18 years old, sometimes you just don't have enough data, enough information yet. So when you think back to high school, Holly, what kind of things were you involved with? Because you said, even a carpenter was something you might have considered. So what kind of things did you do for enjoyment? And when you look back, are those any clues that you look back at, oh, that was going on?
Yeah, I was on my school's quiz bowl team, which is almost like a Jeopardy, trivia type situation. So kind of aligned with the reading and stuff. But I also was in marching band and I played varsity tennis, which, maybe should have shown me I couldn't be a carpenter because I don't have great hand-eye coordination skills. So I did a lot of, after school activities because I was someone again who I kind of like trying everything. And so it was like, oh, I'm going to do some trivia and I'm going to do science Olympiad, but I'm also going to do band and I'm going to do jazz band. And, I just kind of wanted to try everything because I thought that by doing so, I would have a better idea of what I wanted to further to learn. And then instead, I just kind of did a bunch of things. But it was
I think if young people take anything from this, what great sage advice, just to keep trying things and keep learning about yourself and learning. You never knew you had a skill until you tried it, right? So I think that's just great advice right off the top. So you go off to college and you are getting an English degree, you went to Michigan State. I don't know if you said that, but you had already told me. What was that like? Was there pressure to kind of start figuring it out of what you're going to do with it? Do you remember that angst? Kind of help young people understand what's kind of normal feelings and that's okay sometimes.
Yeah, I actually remember my freshman year, I had to talk with my roommate because she was studying to be a vet tech, which is essentially like it's like what a nurse would be to a doctor, but for animals. And I was really jealous of her because I'm like, that's a career that you know exactly what you're gonna do. You go to college and you study, how to help animals, and then you go and you do that. Whereas I was always the type that was like, I'm getting an English degree. You can do literally anything with that, which is good, but also it doesn't provide much structure, and so it took a lot of kind of the same thing in college. I joined like an improv team where I was doing, acting, but you're thinking on the fly, kind of coming up with your own jokes and scenarios. And I did some writing clubs and I joined some political campaigns as like an intern and, things like that kind of helped shape my idea of what I wanted to do. And then my junior year, I was kind of at the point where I was like looking at career prospects and thinking, I've really enjoyed my English classes and I want to keep that. I really like that, but I also want to add something more to my plate to try one more thing. And so I got a second degree in public policy and a minor in peace and justice studies, kind of to keep learning things more and kind of seeing, okay, is there a way to fit in this curiosity about government with my curiosity about English and kind of merge it into something more focused on a career. So still kind of nebulous, still not exactly quite as rigid as like, I'm going to be a vet tech. But it helped pave a little bit more of a strict path for me that it's like, okay, I like communication, I like reading and writing. How can I merge that with the political side of things?
So you ended up getting 2 degrees then in that 4 years? Did it take?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So young people hear that, you don't have to just limit. She was adding things to her plate where she could be more marketable because she had just another little set of skills that she had developed or knowledge that she had developed. So I love that. So public policy, like you said, you kind of, government politics was of interest. So help young people understand, did you have an internship? Was that something that was required of you at Michigan State? I know you said you had one. Did you pursue that yourself? What would you recommend around the internship topic?
Yeah, so it was, for me, it was a requirement for my degree, and it was, in my opinion, very, very helpful, but I also don't think it was necessary to get into the field or anything like that. My internship was actually working on the 2018 governor's race, and so it was, a very different political atmosphere than it is now, and I didn't really know anything about working on a campaign or helping out with a campaign, but obviously it had a pretty major impact on me, as you can imagine. And so for me, it's like, it was an experience that was super helpful in kind of showing me what a practical career might look like in my field. But there was also interns on the campaign who weren't going to college at all, or who were still in high school and things like that. So that was really helpful as well to see, I got here through the college route and that's great, but also there's other people who didn't go that route and are having the same level of success as I am. So that was kind of humbling to, realize that everyone can get there in very different ways.
Yeah, exactly. That's just not one path. So just to kind of take a breath and it will work out. So you got that internship, and is that something that the school helped you find? Did they have like a list of internships and you got to pick it off a list, or you remember the details around that, just to help young people understand how that kind of works?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different ways to look for internships, and I kind of utilized a couple. So we had some requirements around kind of what would count towards a policy focused internship, because there are, a plethora in other fields, and that's great. But for my requirement, it had to be something I can justify to my counselor and such. So they would send, updates via email every so often and post things on a website. But then additionally, you could go on websites like Indeed, for example. That's a good spot to find internships, or at least it was a couple of years ago. And, you could go on there and find one yourself and then kind of take it to your counselor and say, this internship looks really interesting. Does this kind of fit the qualifications? If so, can I get approved for it? Assuming that they want me to be an intern. So I don't remember which one this came through, but there's a good chance it was on both, because a lot of these internships were on the email list as well as like on different websites.
But again, it's just helping young people understand that you have to pursue it, right? It's not going to come to you, and you have to kind of dig into it a little bit.
Absolutely.
So here, you didn't even expect to like it. You go off to this governor's race and doing interns. When you graduated then, was it pretty clear to you that you wanted to keep in that environment, or were you still like, is this what do I really want to do with my English degree and policy?
So I actually, when I graduated, it was kind of a weird time in my life where, as you can imagine, because graduating is hard and it's a major change, and no matter how much people highlight, oh, it's a big deal and it's a big change, you don't really realize that until you're in it and you're looking at, I don't know where I want to live or what I want to do or anything. So when I graduated, I had a little bit of a panic and I was like, I'm going to get a job in Denver, Colorado, and I'm going to move there. And I did that. I actually got a job as an educational travel consultant, which, as you can imagine, doesn't really sound like what I do, because it's nothing like what I do. I was essentially helping with like high school study abroad trips, and helping to plan them and facilitate them. And it was really rewarding. And I got free travel as a result. So I got to go to Panama and stuff, which is amazing. But it's, as I was doing that, I was kind of realizing this is a cool job for someone who is not me. Because I really missed feeling like I'm making, the kind of change that comes with working in folks in the legislature and things like that. So while I was happy to help people travel, and it was a very fun job, and we had an office that had like a foosball table and a fancy coffee machine that would make you lattes. I just kind of was like, I just want to get back to basics. I miss doing stuff in politics. I miss, networking with kind of everyday people, and I miss Michigan. And so I came back to Michigan, and this was in 2020 or so. And I was like, well, what a time to get back into politics. And so hit the ground running.
Well, there's just a couple of things that I wanted just to pull out of that part of your story is one, you went for it. You went out to Colorado and you got a job just to start working. And what I hear happened though, and this is really important for you young people, is that your values started coming to light, that helping people at more of a global level and making impact on our society was really what makes you you. And so you left that job and came back to doing that work. And I think sometimes as young people, we don't know that until we have some experiences. So just starting a job and doing it, I think that's so great and such great advice for young people is just start doing something. And then you'll know, like, this is not right. I got to change. So you came back to Michigan and thought, okay, I do like this politics area. And then how did you network back into that role? Was it someone you knew? Did you go to Indeed? How that transition go?
Yeah, so I think in my field especially, so I never really understood networking, just to be honest. Like, English majors don't network the same way that other people do. And even in high school, like, I did a lot of activities, but I didn't really understand like what networking is. And I think that there's some areas, some career paths where they teach you that, and I felt like I didn't really know that. However, I did know, a couple people who still worked in the field, and I really did lean on them, and that kind of taught me how to network. And now my biggest advice for people in my field is to network. And it's a lot more simple than it sounds. It basically is just getting to know people and, being polite and kind to them. And then, down the line, if they remember you, hopefully they remember you positively. And that has had a really big impact. So like in that case, coming back to Michigan, I reached out to a couple people who I knew worked in the field and just kind of said, hey, like, what do I do? How do I kind of get back into this? Because I would like a job, because it is nice to have money that pays for my necessities. But also I was like, I really want to make a change, and like, I feel antsy and I'm just ready to go. And so actually through networking, I heard about a program called the Great Lakes Political Academy, which does free training for people who want to work in this field. It's not college or anything, but it's, a couple months of a course, just kind of teaching you how do you work on a campaign. And so I applied for them and I got in, and that was huge with A, growing my network, but also B, just learning more about the field, since it is a field that I think a lot of people don't know about. And then also kind of through those same connections, I had people who were like, well, I'll send you emails about different jobs and see if any of these strike, your liking. And sure enough, there was a couple that I applied to and was offered, and I ended up choosing one that was helping with the election in 2020. And ever since then, it has not been too much of a struggle actually to find jobs, even though campaigns happen quickly and they're over quickly, because I have that network and I have people who I can go to and say, I need a job, who do you know, or who's hiring? And, it's actually one of the benefits of working in a field like this that is really small, is everyone knows everyone and they want to lift you up. And so I feel very blessed to have always kind of had a good network who has looked out for me.
Yeah, and there's a couple things. First of all, I never heard that there's such a thing as Great Lakes Political Academy. So that is such a piece of gold that if you do have a student, school counselors that is interested in this, I mean, that's a whole just wonderful resource. So Great Lakes Political Academy, and that it was that kind of credential level, right? We get our degrees, but sometimes we need fine tuning in some of the training. And so I just think that's fantastic. So, but then also, I think part of the way that we're wired sometimes, some people can handle that turnover that you're experiencing in your field. Some people want to know they have the same job for the rest of their lives, like teaching. My husband was a teacher, right? So you get hired as a teacher and you stay as a teacher, and you don't have to worry about the winds of change. So for you, that's not the way it is in political campaigns. And it sounds like you have the support though, that that's not a big deal. At least you've learned to adjust to that's just the way it is. Tell us more about that. Even financial security of knowing this is going to end in 2020 or 2024 or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a little bit challenging when you first, are thinking about joining a campaign and you're looking at it and you're like, come November, or maybe if I'm lucky, a few weeks into December, I'm out of a job. That's scary. And, I think one thing is that for me, at least, I always had the mindset of kind of like other things I'd mentioned in life, I'll try it. And if this is not for me, this is not for me. And if it is for me, then great. And so I think having that kind of open mind helped me a lot with, just looking at new opportunities kind of as they came. And sure enough, like I mentioned, especially with having such a good network, I never struggled too badly to find the next step. And it helps, to kind of look ahead, a little bit before you're done with your job. So usually when the campaign's winding down, a few weeks ahead, I'll start being like, okay, what do I want to do next? And how will I get there? And, like you said, it can be a challenge, especially things like money and healthcare. Those are things that are pretty important to have. And, a job helps with both those things. But, for me, the more that I keep an open mind, the more it tends to work out for me. And the more I'm able to find the next step that helps me climb the ladder. And, in fact, it's like looking at my last 3 years or so, it's like I went all the way from kind of being at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, on a campaign, and kind of worked all the way up to being a campaign manager. And so that comes partially from always looking at the next step and kind of thinking, okay, where can I move up just a little? Where can I move up just a little? And all of a sudden, I was running a statewide campaign that, if everyone here had been 18, you all would have been able to vote on my candidate. And that's pretty surreal.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I love that just try it attitude. For some of us, we obviously have an idea what we think a campaign manager is. So why don't you give us a good overview and maybe address some of the myths of what aren't true about what we think your job's all about?
Absolutely. So I think, just kind of looking at my job, it's a lot of emails. So, I mean, really what you're doing as campaign manager is you're kind of in charge of all of the little details on a campaign. And to be clear, you delegate a lot of that. So for example, we had a bunch of fancy TV commercials and I did not write and direct and film those, but I did kind of oversee the production and would check in and make sure the script was absolutely perfect. And do we want to use this shot of her, or should we tweak it and use this shot instead? And, so it's a lot of looking over all of the little details and offering feedback on, both big picture and small picture stuff. It's also a lot of meeting people around the state of Michigan, in my case, because it was a statewide campaign. So we went to the UP several times. We were in West Michigan, east side of Michigan. We were up north. I mean, just truly all over. And so you're really meeting people from every walk of life, which I think is something that people don't necessarily think about campaign managers doing, is really being out in the field and meeting people alongside your candidate. And in my case, we had a smaller campaign. So I was the only full-time staffer. And so I was driving her around and truly meeting everyone. But in that situation, I was also able to get to know my candidate really well and get to know her as a person in a way that I think most people don't get to know their politicians, which for me was a really rewarding experience that comes with, kind of being in charge of things. And I think past that, in terms of like myths and stuff, I think a lot of people might watch, and these might be dated references and I apologize, but people might watch like The West Wing or Parks and Rec and get a very like cartoonish idea of what we do. And that's fine. But I think people would be surprised by how much of it is, poring over a computer screen and looking at, does this copy of a brochure look better than this one? And they kind of look the same, but you have to pick one. I think people would be surprised by how many kind of mundane tasks there are like that. But on the flip side, I also think that those shows don't really show how rewarding it is to meet all kinds of people. And I can say firsthand that I have met people I never thought I would meet from backgrounds I never thought I would meet. I have, worked with celebrities and things like that, which is kind of, mind blowing. On the other hand, I've met people who I never would have imagined I would meet growing up that have taught me lessons about myself that I never knew. So it's a very social field in a way that I think really surprised me.
Yeah, I think that's great for young people as they're listening to this to think about their own personalities. And obviously you have to be pretty detail oriented. Looking at your field and what makes someone successful in this, obviously you have to have some people connections, and what other kind of skill sets that maybe they could be kind of honing in on while they're even in high school, event planning, time management? What are some of the other qualities that make a good campaign manager?
I think event planning is absolutely one. I know in my case, like before I was a campaign manager, I was actually an events manager. So I did the governor's, I did a lot of her like fundraisers and things like that. So I think that those skills are helpful. I think the main things are to really think about how you present yourself to others and how you treat others. Because like I mentioned, for me, I've had people who have put me up for jobs that I didn't even know until after the fact. And they said, you just always, struck me as someone who was really XYZ characteristic. And so I just told them about you and, send them your resume and things like that. So I think on a basic level, we should all be nice to people because it's good to be nice, right? But also, when you're thinking about your career, it never hurts to just go the extra mile for someone and treat them with that little bit of extra kindness, because for me, that's always been, it hasn't been the motivator, but it has helped me. And I think additionally, it's always good to know that I think it's important to know that your skills can come from a lot of different areas in a field like this. And so I've done finance, I have done events, I have done a little bit of communications, I have done a little bit of data, I've done a lot of people outreach and things like that. And those are all very different. And I like doing, again, a little bit of everything, but some people don't have to. If you're a finance nerd, like you can find your spot on a campaign and do that change that you want to do through the lens of accounting and finance. On the flip side, if you are interested in the news and PR, you can do news and PR for a campaign. So you can really kind of find yourself working in this field, even if you have an interest that is not necessarily what you might think of as being a campaign like skill set.
I love you just fleshing that out a little bit and kind of giving us that little broader view that there is spots for different skill sets and experiences, but some people like you get to do a little bit of everything, which is very attractive to some people. But I think that you're probably a humble person, but the fact that people want to go to bat for you and send your resume out is you're probably being a person of excellence, right? And you're honoring your commitments and doing a good job. And I guess just speak to that, because I think sometimes the younger generation gets a bad rap that maybe they don't have good work ethic, so they don't get it. What would you like them to know that is important, that really does carry you through on this career journey?
I think one of the most important things is to remember balance. And so for me, if I'm going to be out there working and doing my job, I'm going to be putting my best foot forward to do that. But then on the flip side, I'm going to make space for myself at home to decompress and to relax. That way I can go out and kind of do my best every day. Because I think we're in a weird spot where a lot of folks don't necessarily get the rest that they need or deserve. And I know, like I mentioned, I have always been go, go, go. I've always been involved in a bunch of clubs and activities and stuff. But the thing that has helped me be successful is to, really make sure that I'm taking the time to give my best at work, but then also give myself my best at home so that I can go turn around and give my best at work again.
Yeah, is that one of those benefits of COVID? Did that help you, that clarify that for you? I know it did for me. I do look at that rest differently now since COVID.
Absolutely. I think the pandemic helped a little bit with that, especially because we were transitioning what we do on a campaign, because normally you're knocking doors in the summertime, 8, 10, 12 hours in the sun. And then it turns into, you're making phone calls at home in your pajamas, and that's such a different environment, and you have to kind of relearn some of your habits and stuff. So I think that the pandemic really, really affected my way I perceive rest, and, especially in this kind of work. And so I'm a work in progress because I overwork myself sometimes, but I think it's really important to learn from a young age how to not do that, because I think it makes your career easier than if you're learning it as an adult, like I still kind of am.
Yeah. Which ties to the rewarding that you are always learning, right?
Oh yeah.
So as we have about 5 minutes left, Holly, and if we have students who are watching this that think, man, this could be a really good job for me. What are some things that you might recommend that you do in high school? Obviously, you were involved in quite a different things, quiz bowls and tennis, and even the improv team in college. Are there things that you think, man, this might, looking back, this might be a good thing to get involved with?
Yeah, I think, in my case, I wish I had looked a little bit more at a lot of the programs that they have for, high school students and young adults in general. So things like the Great Lakes Political Academy. I wish I had known about that a few years earlier, because I might have gotten in the field a few years earlier, and I don't regret my path at all, but it would have been, just nice to be aware So looking for resources like that, you know, like I'd mentioned before, that resource happens to be free. So it's very different than, you know, a degree or something like that. So it makes it easier for you to feel like, oh, I can try this out. And if it's not for me, it's not for me. Um, so I think looking for resources like that, that just kind of teach you a little bit about the field that aren't a huge investment off the bat. I think that's helpful. And I think additionally, um, one of the nice things about politics that I always say is that it's kind of an evergreen career, in the sense that we're always going to have people who are getting elected. There's always going to be jobs. There's always going to be internships. There's always going to be people to learn from. So, you know, whether it's reaching out to a local elected official to learn more about how they got there, or whether it's reaching out to someone who worked on their campaign to figure out what did that look like, or even just getting involved with the campaign yourself. I know a lot of, especially local campaigns for things like school board and for things like county commissioner, they often need a lot of help and they're not quite as glamorous. So people don't often look to them to help them. And that's a really good avenue for someone who, especially is in high school and wants to learn more about the process, you know, to kind of look up candidates in your area and say, do you need any help? Because chances are that they will. And chances are you'll get a lot more nuanced of an education doing something like that than you would, you know, just trying to kind of shoot to the top, so to speak, in terms of, you know, I want to campaign for, you know, my federal Senate person or something. That might be a little bit harder to do in high school. It can very much happen, to be clear, but I think it's healthy and cool to look at these lower level people, and you'll get to meet them and talk to them a lot more, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think volunteering in general is such an important high school activity, because when you do that, you're meeting people, you're now developing part of your network, adults who can then lead to the next thing you didn't know about or help you make a connection. But also you learn about yourself, right? Like, I really did like this, or I like this piece, but I didn't even know about this piece. So volunteering, I mean, my first full-time professional job came because I'd been a volunteer first there for a year. And that's what opened the door for me. I could have never sold it on paper at that point. And so I guess I just love hearing that there's opportunities right at the grassroots level, right in our own communities, to whether it's stuffing envelopes or picketing with some signs around, whatever that candidate might need is a great way to get in. So we have about 2 minutes left, Holly. And so if anyone has a question that they want to shoot, put that in the chat. Obviously I have lots of questions I like to talk to our mentors about. But I guess just that final word of wisdom, you know, as these young people are trying to figure this all out too, Holly. I mean, you have given so much good advice already. Anything, just final thoughts for you?
You know, I think the most important thing is to not stress yourself out over figuring out your future when you're young. You know, I was in high school 10 years ago, which it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it was. And you know, just thinking back to where I felt then, kind of having the feeling of like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know how I'm gonna figure it out. And, you know, it's crazy looking back on that now as an adult and being like, I was fine. I turned out fine. I got through it. And on top of it, I really like what I do and I feel blessed to do what I do. And so I would just say, don't stress out too much about it, and, you know, do your best to keep an open mind to activities and opportunities as they come. Don't count yourself out and tell yourself, I can't do that. If someone's asking you to do it, think they're asking me for a reason. And just, you know, don't stress, don't count yourself out, have confidence, and it'll probably work out.
It's a very positive way to end this for sure. And it's just golden wisdom. So thank you, Holly, for sharing that and being here today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.